Good morning, Sri Lanka. You are still tuned to Good Morning Sri Lanka with me, Anupama, and my wonderful host, Vanu. I decided to compliment him because he always keeps complimenting me. So, in the previous segment, we had an amazing guest. We had a very intellectual discussion and a very insightful talk with Father Sylvester Ranasinghe, and we're very excited to be here right now because there are so many more things to talk about dynamic youth and how they actually contribute to the society, academic-wise and otherwise as well. We have very interesting guests lined up for you today, right now as well.
Of course, Anupama, when you're talking about complimenting each other, I do that every day when I'm hosting the show with you. I feel really excited, yeah?
I mean, not just with me, you keep doing that every day with everyone.
You look gorgeous, by the way, today.
Thank you, Vanu.
Of course, when we talk about raising awareness and raising our voice to make sure that our voices are heard by the public, we've got a very interesting guest in lineup. Just up next. Please welcome, just 19 years of age, and is a superstar right now.
Wow.
Okay, I consider her to be one. And she is none other than Sohani Pereira, who is the Managing Director of Marketing at the polyroots.com and also the Sri Lankan post-war reconciliation activist. So please welcome Sohani.
Welcome, Sohani.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Of course, it's our pleasure. Sohani, yes, to start off with, we always do ask this on Good Morning Sri Lanka, okay? What's your story?
What's my story? I was born and raised here in Colombo, and I went to Visakha Vidyalaya. I would have graduated last year. And I moved to Maryland, USA a couple of years ago, and right now I'm an undergraduate studying economics at the University of Maryland. So that's my story. It's average.
Not very average. Looking at your biodata, we see that you have a multitude of talents, and you're actually going out there raising your voice comparative to so many people of your age in this country. So why don't you tell us what made you do this? What made you take a stand?
You know, the thing is, being a youth in any society, here in Sri Lanka or in the US where I'm right now, you see a lot of things that you kind of want to be involved in, and you feel like you can genuinely make a change.
Yes.
The problem is that with the social kind of stigma of it, people are reluctant to get the youth more involved.
Exactly.
Thankfully, I come from a very supportive background, and I was always encouraged to be a part of the society that I grew up in and do whatever it is that I can to develop that society. So I think that's what really got me interested in social activism, and I'm a huge fan of, I sincerely believe that when people come together and people kind of mobilize under one common cause, it can be incredibly powerful.
Definitely.
So that's what I try to do with all the causes that I feel passionate about.
Well, when it comes to social activism, one thing that you have to have, the strongest organ in your body is your mouth. You need to talk like non-stop, But we kind of had a chat just before the show, and the audience and Anupama, of course, didn't know about that. But you were talking about how to put this. You were very shy in school, and you were always a silent kid.
You told me that. You told me that.
Exactly. When you went to the real world, how did that shift? And how did it change?
I think a lot of kids, when they're in school, they're really trying to discover themselves. They're trying to find out where their place is in society. So they don't want to say too much. They feel like whatever they have to say may be wrong, may be misconstrued in society.
Why do you think that is?
Because you're growing up, you're learning, and adults may be like, oh, you don't really know what you're talking about. But we kind of do, because we're in school every day learning things that aren't adulterated like they are in society. So we know, like in terms of politics and other, just any subject, we know the raw material. So we kind of tend to compare it to the real world and see, no, that doesn't seem right, so let me say something about that. But kids and teenagers tend to be reluctant to kind of voice their opinions. So I was one of those kids. I was very shy. I used to go to like Model United Nations conferences and sit at the very back and just like wait till it's over and then go home. So but then I kept going back, and I think that's the key to it. If you keep going back and you keep just pushing yourself a little every time you go back, you're going to get better, and you're going to really create an impact and create an image for yourself. So
what was the turning point from where you were to the position that you are right now?
Right now, I think it's a whole lot of passion. when I first got into debating about political issues, it was because I wanted to become a better communicator and I wanted to debate better. And it wasn't that I was necessarily interested in any particular issue. For everything that I do right now, it's something that genuinely concerns me, that I really want to help out in, and I feel like I can genuinely make an impact. As with anything in the world, I feel like you have to have passion to be good at what you do. So with that, I gained a lot of confidence. I'm still learning. I'm still very much learning. I'm still very much in the process of completing whatever I started. And with passion, you get experience because you really put yourself out there and you get confident and keep going. You just don't stop.
Yes. And tell us about Polyroots a little bit.
Yeah, Polyroots is something that a few of my friends were my colleagues, and I started because we want people to express themselves politically. You know, it's like expand your political roots, so to speak. So with Polyroots, it's kind of like Facebook or any other social network. You go online, you make your own account, and you literally talk about anything you want to say. Anything as controversial as you want to. You blog about it. You create your own network of people that you tell about it to. And then you express yourself politically. I think it's very important that in any society, people take part in political conversations and societal conversations and just really
discussions.
Exactly, absolutely, because discussion leads to answers, and that's what we need. And if everyone starts talking, there's going to be a nice diversity of answers that you can benefit from.
So you studied in Sri Lanka and then you went abroad. How was the cultural shift and the bending take place?
Obviously there's a huge cultural gap. Here I went to a Buddhist school, and I went there until my O-levels. And I went right after my O-levels, I went to the U.S. And people in the U.S. thankfully are very friendly, and you know, it's also a very diverse community. The U.S. is so many different religions, cultures, and I was just one of them. You know, I became one of them, but I always maintained my Sri Lankan identity, and I think that's something that I'm glad I did, and people really learned to appreciate, because other people who kind of blended into society, it's just, you become American, but I always maintained that I am a Sri Lankan, and that's why I do what I do here, and that's kind of why I am the way I am.
That's important. Now that's very important. And talking about the youth in the USA, you have seen the youth. Obviously, you grew up with the youth here, and then you moved there. What kind of opportunities? What are the differences between the opportunities you see that Sri Lankan youth are getting here, and the opportunities that the youth are receiving and they are open to in the USA? What kind of differences? Does it always is it always based on culture? Is it always based on politics? Oh,
it's not at all. I would think the education system has a lot to do with it, whereas in the US, in Sri Lanka, you have your 13 years of school. At least for me, was the straight 13. And in the U.S., you have, your elementary schools, your high school for 4 years, and then you go to college for 4 years, and then if you go to grad school, you go for 4 years. At each level of education, there's something that is focused on, that you are supposed to kind of focus on in the U.S. So in high school, your biggest concern is getting a good GPA and getting into college. If you get into college, your biggest concern would be graduating and getting some internships along the way, boosting your resume a little and really putting yourself out there. So in college, you're expected to put yourself out there in society, find out who you are, discover what you are passionate about. In Sri Lanka, when I went to school here, I had amazing teachers who, like the knowledge I learned here, I always retained because it's really good education. But I feel like I became practically kind of more involved in society thanks to like organizations like Interact and Model United Nations. They really push you out, like outside of your comfort zone into a whole new world that you learn to appreciate that later on in life. I've reflected back on my life, and you have no idea how many times I've thanked Interact and the Interact Club of my school for making me, who I am. And they're different, so education is different. I don't think the culture has a lot to do with it. There isn't a lot of religious studies in the U.S. unless you go to a school that is focused on that. But it has its differences, has its pros and cons. But I really feel like in the end, the student will always have the opportunity. I mean, I came from both of these, so I'm a result of both of them. So
Throughout the journey that you had, Suhani, over the 19 years you spent so far, how was it back up from your parents and of course the family?
Oh,
you mentioned that they were very encouraging. Even while we were having the discussion before, I overheard the fact that your father is very encouraging and he's always there for you. So I mean, it's a privilege, because like we spoke before, usually it's when it comes to family, it's like we spoke with Father Sylvester on a singer, it's very important to have that background, that solid background. Yeah, so tell us about that.
Yeah, my family was always very supportive of everything that I do professionally, academically, anything like that. They never forced me into a profession. Like, they never told me, oh, you must be a doctor, or you must be a lawyer. They hinted, but no, they didn't ever push me into it. My father is very protective, he would do anything for me, and he just wants me to be safe in whatever it is that I do. And he was raised here, obviously, so Sri Lankan politics is very different to US politics. And when he thinks politics, he thinks Sri Lankan politics. So he just wants me to be always just be aware of what I'm getting myself into.
So honey, with the experience that you've got from abroad, how would you look back and say that you need to contribute back to your country?
Yes, how would you contribute?
How would you look at that?
Definitely. I mean, right now, like I said, I'm doing my undergraduates. I've always wanted to come back here after I'm done with my education, but I feel like the work that I would end up doing in Sri Lanka, it's very delicate, and you can't just go into it with just a bachelor's degree and with a little bit of experience. So I want to be more experienced in whatever it is that I end up doing, and I want to learn more about whether it's politics. I want to learn more about Sri Lankan politics before I get into Sri Lankan politics, and if it's social work, I definitely want to get into it. And you learn to appreciate what you have back home when you leave home, so you want to come back and help kind of improve that. And I'm so happy to be back right now, and I'm trying to do as much as I can right now while I'm here for a little period of time. So I definitely want to be back at some point.
You're down here for a vacation right now? Any chance after finishing your education coming here and doing something positive for Sri Lanka in the long run?